We've been experiencing some really wild weather, as I would believe a lot of folks that watch this channel have as well. Like this week we're coming into some pretty extreme heat for our area. We normally don't approach 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but we will tomorrow. We've had over 15 inches of rain, I think, from early May until mid-June, which is way beyond the norm. And then along with all that have been these periodic moments of just extreme, profound wind that comes through. Just so much more energy. There's so much more heat and moisture and energy in the system. Anyway, long story short is that in one of the more recent wind moments, there's a stand of miscanthus out at our 6-acre spot here. So I'm walking right now through the woods to look at this space where the miscanthus was just straight up blown down. I've never seen it happen this way. The wind must have been just particularly super strong. I'm going to clean up that miscanthus with my trusty scythe and talk about the idea of harvesting this biomass and using it to support other plants. So this is chop and drop or syntropic agricultural sort of lens here. Let me explain. We are on the south end of this 6-acre plot here, and this is a stand of miscanthus that's been here for years, probably, I don't know, 8 years, 9 years or so. I've never seen it get blown over in the middle of the season. Normally it grows quite nicely. Partially, it might be a little weaker because the trees to the south, including the shipmast locust, these two trees that I planted a ways back, they've gotten big enough that maybe there's a little less light getting to the miscanthus, and so they're building themselves with a little less strength, and so they're a little bit weaker when it comes to wind. But boy, oh boy, they got knocked over. And this isn't great for the stand of miscanthus. Makes it a little harder to manage things. And if I cut them now, here in later June, summer solstice, I think there's a chance for them to regrow and put on another set of growth that's good for themselves and also holds the option of harvesting more mulch. And I think this whole stand, the picture I get is they were pushed to the east from the west. And if I look out, you can see our context is extremely dense and packed so that everything basically has neighbors buffering and supporting each other. Out to the west and south of us, however, is a nice big mowed field, and so I imagine that the wind was able to gain extreme momentum through that field during that particular moment. In fact, I see where the leading ash trees coming into this landscape and even the locusts have been pushed from that particular burst. Miscanthus couldn't handle it. It's a good reminder when you're designing a food forest system or permaculture system, the more complexity and the more relationship of plants, proximity of plants, diversity of plants, the more resilience in all the ways, but also in its ability innately to withstand wind loading. I'm going to set up the tripod for a moment and sharpen the scythe and start cutting some of this miscanthus, and then chat about how we can take this particular green manure moment, this unfortunate moment for the miscanthus, but a really nice thing for the young hazelnuts and the other plants in this landscape, and put it to good service. I'm using a ditch blade on a scythe from One Scythe Revolution. These folks make, I think, the best quality scythe out there, but it's also quite expensive. So if you haven't gotten into scythes yet, buy it from them if you have the money, but maybe you get like a used one at a yard sale and get a feel for it and break that one first, and then eventually this is a really nice tool to consider investing in. I just have a random little sharpening stone. I'm just going to touch it up for a second. It's not the right stone for this, but it's what was in the garage, so that's what I'm using. A little bit of that goes a long way in saving your labor. And so now my work is to clean up this broken miscanthus. I think they're kinked in a way where they're not going to be able to right themselves and repair. So I'm going to start just clearing them out a little. My hope is this doesn't kill them. I think it's just basically a mowing moment. I'll be interested in doing an update later on to see what that regrowth looks like, how it finishes off in the fall, all that kind of stuff too. It is about as hard to cut as bamboo in the mid-season. I can tell there's a ton of silica in this. It really resists cutting. Maybe a little like hedge trimmer is the move for next time. So that was cleaning up just a few square feet. I would guess that's like 4 feet by 6 feet of downed miscanthus. Now the question might be, why not just leave it? That's fine. I think, just like with other grasses, if they lay down flat, it slows them down. In fact, I often take that pattern to my, or use that pattern to my advantage in suppressing grass as a weed by pinning it down and putting material on top. So I suspect as a grass, this weakens or slows down the miscanthus, and just like grass, if you cut it infrequently and relatively low, it triggers a lot of regrowth. This is an immense amount of mulch. It's a little bit difficult to work with. It's pretty big and long. This could be a thing where maybe you have a machete or you have an electric chipper. I just found one used online. At some point I'm going to bring that into play, but my preference is to work with things as they are. And so I can take handfuls of this and actually, so here, for example, are cuttings of blackcurrant that I added into the boundary planting in this mowed area between new willows and a mowed area. The deer were coming after the willows really intensely. Blackcurrant has a really nice ability to help deflect browse. So if the deer are walking through and they rub the blackcurrant, it lets off a strong aroma. And so this miscanthus packed nice and tight up against the blackcurrant. I'd be doing this more elegantly if I wasn't also trying to record. I think will have a positive effect in holding in moisture, keeping the soil cool, creating a really clear boundary, and so I'll move a fair bit of it into that position. Interesting things to note for myself for future record, but other folks working with these plants as well. Miscanthus is sharp. The leaves have a fairly strong amount of serration to them, so you might consider long sleeves and gloves. It feels pretty irritating on the skin actually, but not that big a deal. Very, very heavy. It feels like miscanthus holds a huge amount of water in itself, which I did not know. I normally work with these stalks when they're dormant. We cut them in March, and they're super light. They're almost styrofoam light, although still very strong. So lots of moisture, lots of silica, lots of resistance to cutting, and it feels like they would lay down as a beautiful mulch. I could imagine harvesting miscanthus using hay forks and wheelbarrows to deliver it to windrow next to potato plants, or to bound a tomato planting at the boundary of a field, and offer huge amounts of moisture and nutrients in there, lots of carbon, lots of green. For now, I think these blackcurrants are going to be thrilled with that. But yeah, long sleeve shirt, gloves, and maybe a hay fork to move the material would have been the right thing. I do a significant amount of cutting with that scythe, with that particular tool, the ditch blade, and this is material that would probably be better with a bush or a brush blade. You can feel it's right on the edge of what this tool can do without hurting it. Pretty amazing, because it just basically seems like it's just a tall grass hanging out, but it's on its way to transitioning from grass, which I cut a lot with the scythe, to bamboo, which definitely is brutal to try to manage with the scythe. In fact, this miscanthus stand has bamboo mixed in, and you can see how much more silica and structure the bamboo has. With that same wind loading, the miscanthus fell over. Bamboo wasn't even phased. How do we leverage the immense amount of value of moisture retention and feeding and weed suppression that offers, and intersect that with the shortest commute? And so here are some hazelnuts that are hiding out in some ferns. I think that's partly why they're not getting browsed by deer. Same thing here. And I can say, well, all right, I don't want to pin down all the weeds necessarily and reveal them to the deer, but I can add some miscanthus in between just to add a little bit more moisture retention in here. And then at some point when we put a ring around these to protect them, we've got mulch right nearby. A pretty short commute from where it was cut and into the main walkway to a delivery. And so this makes a nice little simple pathway mulch in between. So we've got female seaberry, some cultivar orange energy female seaberry with black currants planted amongst them. These hazelnuts that are intentionally allowed to be super weedy around them to evade some deer browse, and in fact wild blackberries we encourage to grow over them. There's stinging nettles in here that also will help these hazelnuts get a chance. And there's a ditch through here that allows excessive rainfall to pass through the landscape, but we're coming into some extreme heat, so putting the miscanthus down so that if we do get more rain, it holds it and slows it and wicks it in around the hazelnuts, around the seaberry, is beneficial. So lots of layers of nice benefit. Wishing you all good, abundant growth wherever you are, and ways to manage excessive heat or excessive cold, dry, wet, all the different far edges. Great reminder to me, the more plants the merrier, the more structural diversity, the more relationship that's happening. These plants can be cut to feed those plants. At the end of the season, that can be cut to liberate nitrogen, which feeds the plant underneath. Can be used as barbed wire to protect plants around them. So many different layers of relationship, and that all expose themselves as to what is the right way to interact by interacting with them, observing what's happening, touching it a little, poking at it a little. So for example, mowing some to see what happens if you use that as a mulch, leaving some if you want to learn what's going on if you don't intervene. Maybe I didn't have to at all and it's all going to be fine. Anyway, just a couple permaculture principles in action, and the idea of rearranging debris after a windstorm, which is basically what this was. Thanks for watching.